Well, as a composer, I always try to make beautiful things. That's my constant throughout my whole career. And I use different materials for different pieces. I never do anything twice, and I use a whole variety of approaches, materials, and techniques, always to make beautiful things in the end. Very often, a composition for me begins with a motive or a melody or just a really cool sound that I want to elaborate on, and then I go from there. And sometimes I find myself beginning in what eventually turns out to be the middle of the piece, and so it always varies on a case-by-case basis. It's always different. There's no particular time of day that I prefer to write. I pretty much compose any time that I can, any time that's available. What I do like to do is block out several hours to work, and at some point during that period, I'll take a nap, for 15, 20 minutes. And partly it's a way of avoiding the process, but it's also, I'm convinced that it's a part of the compositional process, actually. That is, I do conscious work of trying to solve musical problems. And when I reach a kind of impasse, if I can take a nap for 20 minutes, unconsciously I'm still working on it. I do think it's a mysterious thing, but I do think that that's true. And when I awaken, when I'm conscious again, very often a solution will present itself. Well, when I start to write a composition, I write for myself as a listener. I write for myself as a composer, of course, because when I start to write a composition, I write for myself as a listener. I think, what would I like to hear? For example, if I'm working on a commission that I know where it's going to be premiered, I know who's going to be performing, I imagine myself buying a ticket, showing up, sitting down. What would I like to hear? And my attitude is I want to be amazed. I want to be thrilled. I want it to be an exciting experience. And so that's what I bear in mind as I'm working on a composition. I don't write for other composers necessarily. I don't write for newspapers. I write for people. I'm a person, and I like to think that I have enough in common with other people such that if I'm convinced by something, I hope there will be a critical mass of other people who will also be convinced by what I'm doing. So, I expect my compositions to be self-evident. That is, I hope that they explain the rules that they follow in the piece itself as it's unfolding. And so I don't expect an audience member or listener I don't expect the audience member to have done their homework, so to speak. You don't need preparation necessarily, I hope. I hope that the piece does the heavy lifting in that sense. And I hope that it makes cognitive sense to the listener as it's unfolding in the concert hall or on CD or whatever. Yeah. Well, sometimes a piece will be inspired or triggered by some extra musical aspect of a play or a building that I've seen, a spectacular landscape that I've seen. Sometimes that happens. For example, in a piece called Tempest Fantasy, that's very much influenced, and the catalyst for that piece was really Shakespeare's play, The Tempest, and various aspects of it, the characters, various quotations from, speeches from the play and so on. And then there are other pieces that are completely abstract, a piece called, Clarinet Concerto. I mean, that's it. I mean, it's a concerto for clarinet and orchestra, So the influences in my work are sometimes extra musical and other times completely abstract and come out of the motives or, harmonic progressions themselves. An opera is nothing if not a practical medium. And whatever doesn't work theatrically, in my view, has to be altered or jettisoned or cut out or whatever. And that's what I did in the rehearsal process of the letter last summer at Santa Fe. When we got into the rehearsal process, there were a few revisions I realized I needed to make the piece work theatrically. So all musical concerns were sacrificed in the interest of making this thing work as a piece of theater. I think that's absolutely essential when you're putting on an opera. 'Cause, there's nothing quite like music theater. It's not music per se, and it's not theater per se. It's this third thing. It's music theater. And one of the things I had to learn in this new craft, so to speak, that for me was new, is to make sure that the musical logic and the dramatic logic all went in the same direction. In other words, it's like trying to control two willful horses, because music will follow its own logic, and if you follow the musical logic, it might take you away from the dramatic logic, which will follow its own path. So what you need to do is make sure that the two elements are exactly synchronized. Otherwise, it's chaos, and it just doesn't work. You know? In a certain sense, an opera composer needs to be egoless. I mean, of course, we all have big egos. You know, otherwise, why would we expect people to show up and you know, spend $200 a ticket to come and see, you know, this spectacle? Of course, we have big egos to expect that. But in a certain sense, we can't let our egos show in the process of collaboration because it's a very collaborative, process. You have, in my case, there were something like 250 people working on this production, building sets, costumes, you know, and so you need to be aware of making the opera work as well as possible, bear that in mind, and keep all other ego concerns off to the side. And I was very lucky in this case because everybody had that attitude at Santa Fe. Amazingly about Santa Fe, it's a place without prima donnas. Everybody's on the same page, that is to make the project work as well as possible. And they're total professionals, and it was just it's a great privilege and a joy to work with that company. Well, one of my favorite composers is Stephen Sondheim, who falls between two stools very often when people are thinking, you know, how do we he's uncategorical. It's hard to categorize Sondheim because he's is he pop? Is he, you know, classical? Is he, what is he? What is he? You know. For example, I think that Sweeney Todd is the greatest American opera written, and in the view of some people, it's not even an opera. But I think it's a great opera. What makes it an opera is the epiphany scene, because it's on a scale, and it's the emotional intensity of that scene takes it out of the realm of musicals, and it's, you know, we're in another genre now. I mean, it's and of course there's spoken dialogue in it, and it looks like a musical in a lot of ways. But I think it's a very great opera. So.